So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the personal appeal that public service has had for you in your long lifetime as a public servant.
Well, I don't know of anything that one can do in this world that is more personally fulfilling and satisfying than being in a position where you can make a real difference in the lives of your fellow citizens. And I see that as what politics at its best is all about. And I've had the great good fortune to be able to do that virtually my entire life, both in politics and now teaching public policy and remaining still very active in public affairs, both here in Massachusetts and nationally. And these days I get enormous satisfaction from being able to teach and guide and mentor lots and lots of terrific young people, both here and at UCLA in the wintertime, who I hope and expect are going to be the next generation of public leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're trying to do exactly the same kind of thing at Anatolia and ACT. And it's, I think, as wonderful a life as one could have. I've never regretted it for a minute. I'm sorry I didn't make it to the White House. That would really been
Well, that's all right.
all of this.
I don't think you would have been able to make me breakfast if you were in the White House. So
I'm
we'll.
not so sure.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. But in any event, as I often said, we'd have been dancing the Sapiko in the White House,
Right.
which would have been something.
What was it?
But
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I try, Dave, as you know, very hard to help my students understand is that you can do it while setting high standards of integrity for yourself and the people that work for you. And I'd like to think that's something not only I've been able to do, but I think and I hope I've been able to encourage lots of my students and the people that work with me to do that. You know, it's not difficult to set high standards of integrity and live by them, at the same time do good things in public life. And I can't think of a better life. And after all, it was the ancient Greeks that first told us, right, that
Yeah.
the single most important thing one could do and be was to be an active citizen in one's city, state, and so forth. And nothing has changed in that regard. I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
What
what public service is all about.
What was it for you personally that sort of was the snap or the spark? You said, "I'm going to get involved in the way that you did." There was some, I think, family history, a little bit of politics, but as a young person,
Not much. I mean, remember, my parents were both immigrants. They both came over here at a relatively young age, back in 1912 and 1913.
yeah,
Young Greek immigrants weren't going into politics in those days. They were just trying to support themselves and their families.
Right.
In the case of my parents, get an education, which was quite unusual. I mean, my mother was the first Greek American immigrant woman ever to go away to college in the history of the United States, and that was very unusual at the time. This 9-year-old girl from Ladysmith who comes to Haverhill, Massachusetts, and ends up at Bates College, and so. It wasn't so much that, but I did have parents who, while not politically active, took world affairs seriously. And they
okay,
expected their kids to take them seriously.
mm-hmm.
But there are lots of other. I mean, why did I run for the presidency of my third grade class at the Baker School in Brookline, Massachusetts? Why did my classmates elect me? I don't know.
Yeah,
But I will tell you that years later, when I became governor, I called that third grade teacher, who was still teaching, by the way, up in Groton, Massachusetts. I said, "Mrs. Ripley, this is the guy you got started in elected politics. And how would you like to bring your class down to the governor's office and visit?" I had a basketball coach, who happened to be Kitty's homeroom teacher, although at that time, we didn't know each other.
mm-hmm.
And he was the first adult who said to me, he hated Joe McCarthy. He couldn't stand McCarthy.
Ah.
And he said to me, "Dukakis, someday you ought to run for elective office." And that was the first adult that ever said that to me.
Okay.
It's these interesting influences, maybe that have an impact in your life. And so, it's a combination of things. I was taught that this was a country that believed deeply in justice and civil rights, and yet I grew up in a segregated society.
Right.
That didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So, no, it's hold on, David, just a sec. John, could you close that door? I'm talking to people in Greece. Close the door. How long are you going to be?
We'll stop the clip there. There's a bit of a problem with the sound. Anyway, I thought this would be an opportunity, having listened to that, to open the floor to comments or questions. We have two interns with the wireless microphones who will pass among you. Identify yourselves, and you can ask a question in Greek or in English, whatever is your pleasure. And let's maybe reflect a little bit on what we've heard. I'll ask Pavlos to sum up his thoughts about this clip in particular.
The
and
idea
we'll
of
see.
dancing Hasapiko in the White House sounded good.
I mentioned that we have students from around the United States, some 350 who are attending classes at ACT this semester. We have students from I don't know how many countries actually attending classes here, taking degrees. And I saw a gal of Oriental origin, and I said, well, can you imagine how you would feel if a Chinese American ran for president of the United States? And may happen in my lifetime. It will certainly happen in the young people's lifetimes. It's quite extraordinary to think about. Questions or comments at this point? Anyone want to reflect a little bit on what Michael Dukakis may have meant to you? I was speaking with someone in the audience who said he was in the United States in 1988. Would you like to share that story a little bit?
Yeah, I was studying in the United States. I'm sorry. Yes. Hi, I'm Evita Gantina. I'm an adjunct professor here. I was studying in the United States back in 1988. I was in Houston, Texas. And back then in Houston, people loved Bush. They still love him, the whole family. Even I was close to the Greek community, going to church and everything, and they would find every single excuse not to like Dukakis. His wife is not Greek, she's not Greek Orthodox, he doesn't speak good Greek, he has an accent, just name it. Bush was not from Houston, but he was, during the elections, he was there at the convention center, and even Greeks would not even bother to vote for Dukakis.
Similar story over here. Some other gentleman told me he was in the United States. Sir, would you like to share your story?
Hi. I was there in 1988, and I was in Wisconsin, Madison. It was like a liberal state, and it was one of the states that Dukakis won. I think he won in 11 states, and one was Wisconsin. I was in his speech when he came to Madison twice, and we didn't have a very great, big actually, Greek community, but all the people liked him. As I told you, it was a liberal state, but unfortunately it's a very small state, so they only have like 11 electoral votes, so actually it didn't matter that much. Yeah.
Okay. He may have won California. Ruth, did you have something you wanted to add back there? Ruth Sutton, a former instructor here at ACT, adjunct professor.
Hi, thanks. I'd like to just share a more contemporary experience. When I was teaching here, my students were working on a project that they conceived themselves through the Dukakis Center. And Mr. Dukakis came and spoke with the students, and I used the preposition very carefully. He spoke with the students. He didn't talk at them, he didn't talk to them. He asked them questions, he listened to them. He even sat on a recycled chair that a group of 5-year-olds had made with complete trust. None of the rest of us trusted it. He sat on a recycled chair. I was very impressed by that, but he didn't engage with all of the so-called important people around him. He was interested in the students, and he was interested in what they had to say, not just telling them things. And that made a huge impression on me, because it's extremely rare for a politician.
Ruth, hold the microphone for a moment. You oversaw the execution of two major projects some couple years ago at a time that we were gearing the young people to sort of design their own projects and take ownership of some contribution to society. How did you and how do you now define public service?
Big pause. Hold on a minute.
Okay, I've done. I got Pavlos and I've got Ruth. I'm 2 for 2 right now.
I'm not on the same level. I would say something a little bit more every day than an epigraph on a tombstone. I would say that if you're in a society and you have your needs met and you have your rights, it's kind of your responsibility to engage in public service. So I would say it's a huge honor to be part of organizations and be part of projects that can perform public services, but I would say it's something very, very everyday. The issue of picking up litter. When you walk around with it, you're walking through the streets, carry a plastic bag, pick up litter. I would define that as public service, just kind of everyday responsibilities.
He does it, and I read the same story, and he meets the young people at the train station, and they say, "What are you doing?" He said, "Do you know who I am? I was your governor." How many governors, how many ex or former governors do you meet picking up litter, caring about the cleanliness of public spaces? How many Greek politicians have ever done such things? Maybe you pick something up from the Skiladiko when you go out for a political event, something like that. Thoughts or comments on what you've heard?
Yeah. One thing, I like the answer you gave. That reminded me of an example somebody produced some time ago, many years ago. He said, you're in a theater and there's a fire or an earthquake. People panic and scream. The stronger they look for an exit. But some people would say, would look around and would try to find a way to help all the people in the room get out safely. Well, that's public service in a way. Not caring about how I get out as quick as I can, but no, I shouldn't get out as quick as I can because there's a bunch of people here and I have to help them. I think this is also a good definition of what public service might mean.
Let's segue to our second clip now. This is a slightly longer video clip. It's an excerpt from the documentary that the couple young men over here are producing for me. And I want to say it's been an incredible experience for me because when you talk with people, you assume that they don't know anything about what you do until you start to listen to them and realize that they actually have something to teach you. And that would be maybe the theme of what we're trying to communicate this year at the Dukakis Center. It's not about me sharing my mastery of public administration or telling you that you can be ethical and you don't have to sell out. It's about communicating a sense of trust that you can say something to me that's meaningful and I would go into a conversation or exchange with you thinking that I can learn something from you. It's certainly been the case with Dimitris Savaidis, who's engaged in really remarkable sorts of activities that we would call public service. Dimitri had a dugout for another engagement. And Asteris Goutsidis, who's working the cameras now, has understood that what he's doing in producing this documentary is a kind of public service. It's inside of every individual, is what I would say to a young person. It's there. We'll just ask you to share it, and perhaps you have something more to teach us. We'll come back to the discussion after we watch.
There is nothing you can do in this world more fulfilling and more satisfying than giving of yourself to others and making a contribution to your community and your state and your nation and your fellow citizens.
On March 16, 1987, Michael S. Dukakis, governor of Massachusetts, announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. A little over a year later, Dukakis won the nomination of the Democratic Party, but was defeated in the general election by George H.W. Bush. In his concession speech on Election Day, Dukakis had a special message for the many young people who had supported his campaign. "I hope many of you will go into politics and public service," he said. "It is a noble profession, noble profession." When he completed his final term as governor and retired from public life, Dukakis returned to his previous vocation of college professor. In this vein, in September 1999, Michael and Kitty Dukakis visited ACT, the American College of Thessaloniki, to inaugurate what was to become the Dukakis Center. As we enter our 20th season of public service initiatives at the Dukakis Center, we celebrate the spirit and legacy of this great American public servant. This is our story.
I'm really delighted to be at an event sponsored by the Dukakis Center. Again, coming from Massachusetts, Mike Dukakis is one of the giants in Massachusetts politics. But not only Massachusetts. When I was in high school, Mike Dukakis hosted a television show on public radio called The Advocates. And for an adolescent really interested in debate and in public issues, that was just an eye-opening television show. And so people of my generation, we were really inspired to think about national issues by watching that show in many cases.
Now more than ever, young people need to be challenged to feel that they have a fundamental contribution to make to the well-being of their communities. The Dukakis Center was created with this very mission in mind.
So we're going to try to accomplish, essentially, by the end of the second day of deliberations tomorrow, to draft a democratic charter for Europe. The purpose of your debates the next 2 days is to try to decide what kind of democracy you want for Europe. What democracy will look like in the next 10, 20, 30 years in your Europe.
Our future depends on how effectively we inspire coming generations to involve themselves in public affairs, how enthusiastic they can become about the task of collective decision making, how well we can learn to listen and appreciate what they have to teach us, their peers and their elders. The Dukakis Center was launched in 1999 as an endowed chair and transformed in 2011 into a full-fledged university center. In that time, the Dukakis Center has organized and hosted hundreds of public events and educational activities in Thessaloniki and beyond. One of 3 dedicated outreach centers at ACT, the tertiary division of Anatolia, The Dukakis Center is the proud standard bearer of Anatolia's century-and-a-half-long commitment to civic and social responsibility.
Paramount to ACT's mission is our institution's contribution to society by cultivating students' democratic and civic awareness. The Dukakis Center clearly allows us to realize this mission for our students and beyond, because the center allows us to have a direct communication and linkage to our community here. The role of the university is to prepare the citizens of tomorrow. In every aspect, no matter what the students study, they have to be equipped and ready to become productive members of their respective communities.
It's a place where young people who have not lost themselves in despair, who have hope for the future, who want to do constructive and useful things, come to figure out for themselves the best way to do that, the best way to be of service to the people in their community. The only way you understand what public service is by doing public service. And the center is the place you come to start doing public service so that you understand it and it becomes a value that you hold dear yourself.
In America, I started volunteering at a young age, mostly for selfish reasons. And it was an organization where you would volunteer to mentor sixth graders that were from unprivileged areas of town. They're the ones who got in trouble with the law, the ones who committed crimes, are the ones who skipped school, had bad grades. And there I met a kid named Robert. And before Robert, I really didn't care too much about anyone but myself. It was more just getting into college, get a good job. Robert, his father had left him when he was young. And he didn't really have a father figure in his life. And I was a 19-year-old selfish kid who didn't really, I didn't know how to tell a young man, why he should be ethical or why he should try to go to college when his parents didn't. And that was my first real experience where I wanted to actually make a change, make a difference. So for me, we started talking about grades. And I worked with him an hour a week for 4 years. His grades have improved. He stopped getting in fights. He stopped getting suspended. And I mean, it changed my outlook on life.
ACT subscribes to a pedagogy of experiential learning, of learning by doing. For 20 years, the Dukakis Center has been a pioneer in the development of innovative learning activities on and off campus. Masterclasses, academic simulations, study trips and diplomatic tours, debates, blogging, television programming, internships on and off campus, and a wide variety of student-designed civil society projects. Our mission also calls for us to engage actively with the local community and our diverse constituencies. Thus, the Center hosts a wide variety of major public events annually, including lectures, seminars, conferences, roundtables, and book presentations featuring prominent practitioners, scholars, and publicists. Topics have ranged from foreign policy to sustainable development, from historical remembrance to creativity. The Center's flagship program is the renowned series of Dukakis lectures, which feature high-profile speakers, often in exclusive appearances on and off campus, occasionally in collaboration with other institutions in Greece and abroad. The common thread in all these activities is a commitment to inspiring youth to take up active roles in public affairs.
Despite the fact that in every project there are loads of obstacles, the entire process of watching the students come up with an idea and actually put it into practice successfully is hugely enjoyable. It's exhausting, but seeing students actually not be quite sure at the beginning, like, can we actually do this? Seeing them take responsibility, seeing them come up with amazing ideas, seeing them overcome problems, and in the end produce something which is much, much bigger and better than we could have hoped is just fantastic. The two main projects, one of that I can think about that really kind of reflect this, illustrate this. The first one's the Recycle Monster, in which students came up with a fantastic idea to spread environmental awareness by going around schools and encouraging children not to sit down and learn a whole load of things by heart about the environment, but to create art, monster art, out of trash. The other one was a project called Street Kid to School Kid, and it was a very ambitious project, and in the end we couldn't do the entirety of it because it involved many months of social research that we didn't have time for within the scope of the course. But the idea was to raise awareness and kind of empathy, but not sympathy necessarily, not pity, for kids who are on the street.
We will never bring disgrace to this our country by any act of dishonesty or of cowardice. We will fight for the ideals of this our country. We will revere and obey the law. We will strive to quicken our sense of civic duty. Thus, in all these ways, we will transmit this country greater, stronger, prouder, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us.
Second segment where we'll reverse roles, and I'll invite our guest speaker to be the guest inquisitor, and we'll tell you a little bit about the Dukakis Center and some impressions that you may have coming here.
Γιατί διάλεξε το Δουκάκι? Δηλαδή, Ανατόλια, ACT, γιατί προσκαλέσετε το Δουκάκι να αναμειχθεί στο εκπαιδευτικό πρόγραμμα, το Δουκάκι και όχι κάποιον άλλον?
Excellent question. The office of the Board of Trustees of Anatolia College is located in Boston, across the street from the State House. Certain members of the Board of Trustees were personally acquainted with Michael Dukakis, a prominent Hellene, Greek-American. It was a natural approach. A Greek-American, someone who would have visibility in Boston and the Northeast, in the United States generally, but who could also be a statesman for what we stand for, what we aspire to stand for. It was chance, in a way. You mentioned, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Well, this was our chance. And he was, I think, genuinely honored by the invitation, and he supported us, as you see.
That's what I wanted to ask. What was really his first reaction? I mean, when he was approached?
I can't say. My first meeting was before your first meeting. So I met him first, and then you did the interview. I mean, it was really in that same interval of a couple of weeks in September 1999. I can only tell you, and we were with Fotini at the time, we approached him, and he engaged us for a 15, 20-minute conversation. The room was full of other people that he's going to get to in his time, but he had time to learn about us, to see what we were doing. It's an extension of who he is. He had left public life in 1991. That was the end of his term as governor. And he started lecturing casually in a variety of places throughout the United States. And then he was invited by the then president of Northeastern University, whose name I don't recall, to have a presidential position, a presidential lecture or something like that, honorary president. And I'll tell you this, he works more at 82 than I work at 102. I mean, the guy is incredible. He walks to work every day, or he takes public transportation if the weather's a little inclement. He sits in the office, he grades papers, he just sits with his students, and then he goes and teaches. And when he's not doing that, he's involved in all kinds of other things. It's quite, and I think that it was an extension. It was a way for him really to become Greek in a way that he wasn't able to prior, to come to Greece. And he's traveled and visited Greece a couple of times subsequently, as you've mentioned.
Well, that's one of the most astonishing thing about him. We know many academics that went into politics, but I don't recall anybody after having such a high caliber political career, reaching high office, turning back to an academic career. Usually ex-presidents, ex-governors, ex-politicians do the lecture tour.
Think tanks. Think tanks is a big thing for us, and it's
too.
very lucrative.
Yeah,
and you don't really do much. You might write an article, an op-ed, you go on a speaking tour. You're paid $100,000. I think the going price for an ex-president like Bill Clinton is $100,000. If you were Bill Clinton, I would have to fork over $100,000. Not for Michael. He does it for free.
That's it. And then he goes every day to his office at the university, and he really teaches. He goes into class and do class every day. That's an amazing thing about him. Have you ever thought that someone else might be better as a namesake, as a...
That's above my pay grade. But I will say this. There is a tradition in the United States that, let's say, a retiring public official will lend his name to a university program. I'm thinking, there's the Bush School, Texas. They're almost a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. Colin Powell, somewhere in New York City, has a program named after him. So that's not so unusual. And the idea of approaching Michael Dukakis was also, I think, the spur to Northeastern proposing to create a center which focuses on urban and public policy. So there's a sister institution now at Northeastern. It's not uncommon. Governors, especially in the executive branch of the United States at the state or federal level, is not uncovered. Or you have a senator, for example, who lends his name to his alma mater.
So, okay, you've been around for 20 years. This is a project that has been going on for 20 years. Can you mention 1, 2, 3 things that you're proud of?
An event we did with the late Chrissa Nicolari. You saw footage in this video that was done by her brother, Christos Nicolaris, the film producer. He did a master class in filmmaking with us, and the students actually produced some of the footage that will be in the documentary. Chrissa, at the same time, it was the spring semester of 2014, did a master class in photography. She came up with the idea that we would send students to shadow candidates in the local and European elections. She trained them. We approached the different candidates. They agreed. We set the students loose. They organized an exhibition of the photographs at the port annex of the National Museum of Contemporary Art back in, I think, May or June of 2014. I'm really proud of that one. I'm proud of the two projects that Ruth's students did, because from beginning to end they were student-designed, student-led projects. And those are the kinds of things, above all, that are most meaningful for me, and I think for the students as well. And there are many others. We've done countless lectures. I mean, countless lectures. Every day it's a bigger number. That's how countless it is. But these are the kinds of things that really stand out for me.
And όταν είστε σε επαφή με τους φοιτητές, στα μαθήματα, στις εργασίες, στις δραστηριότητες, τι είναι αυτό που αισθάνεστε απέναντι στο πίσω από το public and humanitarian service υπάρχει το politics in a way. Τι είναι αυτό που αισθάνεστε και στη διάρκεια αυτών των 20 χρόνων πώς έχει αλλάξει αυτό που αισθάνεστε ότι είναι στο μυαλό τους για την πολιτική? Τι είναι για αυτούς η πολιτική?
Okay, it's a good question, and allow me to say a few things about the academic program here. Initially, the idea was the Dukakis Center would supplement studies in new field of study in international relations. The international relations program at ACT is 20 years old also. My chair, Dr. Maria Kirikidu, was in the audience a short while ago. We train leaders. That's what we do. But it's not an academic sort of training. We help people realize that they have leadership qualities. Okay, you can take a humble man like Michael Dukakis and say, well, there's some leadership characteristic in his personality, and I can be that way. Michael says, and you saw it in the clip, you can be decent and honest and avoid corruption and still do something good. Over time, that for me has been a core message. We send young people into the world. You know, the element of trust that I was alluding to a little while ago is precisely that. I trust you guys are you're gonna be there when we need you to be there, the next generation.
The question was, do you feel they're interested? Do you think that you persuade them that you can be decent, honest, avoid corruption, and still be in politics?
I tell you what, let's let them answer. Tarek? The question as put by our guest.
Oh, yes. So yeah, I'm an intern in Dukakis Center. This is my third semester as being an intern. And it's been a great pleasure working with Dr. Wisner and cooperating with the experts that we had opportunity to through all these semesters. We have hosted one of the most influential experts, not only from the Balkans and Europe, but from the United States as well. And yes, of course, I'm of course motivated and interested in taking a step toward engaging actually in politics and making changes, let's say.
Okay, is Gordon still here? There you are.
Hi everyone, my name is Gordon and I'm also an intern of the Dukakis Center. I started interning 4 years ago when I started my college, and it has been since then a pleasure to me to be on every event and volunteer by myself. For Dukakis Center, I would say that it changed my way of life and my perspective about the politics and about democracy and about everything else that we as human beings need to do for our community. So I encourage everyone from the students present here, because it's our last year being here, to be encouraged and volunteer as much as they can, because in the end, that stays forever. Thank you.
There you are. I didn't need the answer. Okay. We have our final guest this evening is a student at the high school.